Morning. Can you guys hear me? I'm sorry, I'm crying already. um, I always say that the hardest part of doing all of this is watching myself and my family on a screen and then having to stand up and admit in front of strangers that this is my life. Or even more importantly, the life of my children. Um, but I'm here today not only as a person who has been hungry or who has to go without eating in order to feed her kids. I'm here as a voice for all of the people that you don't know, for all of the people that you do know that might be in your community and are just too afraid to speak up about this issue. Um, a lot of people think that when the issue of hunger comes up, it's in another country. It's children in Africa that are really, really skinny, and you can see their bones, and you wouldn't think that, or even by looking at me, that I was someone who has had to miss meals in order to feed her children. But it's the reality. Um, I've battled a lot throughout the years with the shame of having to talk to complete strangers about this problem and feeling inadequate and feeling like a bad mother, because as a mother, your children look to you to provide not only the love and nourishment that they need, but as a role model. And when you're going through things like this, it doesn't feel like you're a good role model. I've been advocating for about 8 years now, and as Pastor Jake stated, I've been to the White House, I've testified at the Hill, and it's been a very long and hard journey. And one of the hardest parts is having to explain to people who are making decisions about where the money goes in this country and what issues are important and which ones can be put to the side. Having to look them in the eye and say, my family deserves food. Being someone who was on welfare comes with its own stigma. Being Hispanic in Philadelphia, in a low-income community that's filled with drugs and violence, comes with its own stigma. I've battled a lot with feeling like I have to prove myself. And I think the most important reason why I do all of this is not to prove who I am as a person, but to prove that food is a right. It's not a privilege. And my children, unfortunately, through our struggles, have been taught that food is a privilege. They're not allowed to go in the fridge and just pick out whatever they want, whenever they want, because they know that tomorrow it might not be there. I've had to yell at them and punish them when they would give food without permission, as if they really did something wrong. Just because I didn't know when will be the next time they will be able to eat. And I share all of this with you today because I don't want anyone to know what it feels like. It hurts. It physically hurts. It mentally hurts. It's very draining and exhausting. And if I have to keep doing this to share my story, to sort of try to prevent other families from going through this, then I'll continue to do so. I've battled a lot with the decisions that I've made as far as being featured in this documentary and exposing my life and the kids' lives and how we have to go through these issues. I'm sorry. But before I started doing so, I didn't know anyone who was. And I was tired of complaining and feeling like nothing was getting done. I was tired of people saying, she's a welfare queen. She doesn't want to get a job. She's not smart. She just wants to be on public assistance. And not understanding that I'm a person just like you. And that hunger doesn't discriminate. This can happen to anyone and everyone. For a long time, I've struggled with a lot. Homelessness and domestic violence and poverty. All of these things, for me at least, seem to go hand in hand. And when I've spoken about so many things and have had to answer questions that people would ask, a lot of people don't really understand how they all tie in together, or how obesity and hunger can be on the same scale. In the film, it shows a little girl named Tremonica. She was 8 years old. She was obese. She had problems with diabetes. And it showed her mom making macaroni and cheese and oodles and noodles and things of that nature. And what I hope people would take from that are the decisions that we have to make in order for our kids to eat. Sometimes these decisions aren't the healthy ones. A lot of the times, the food that we're feeding them has a lot of calories and it's not good for you, but it's filling. In the film, I talked about how when I was a little girl, I would eat cans of Chef Boyardee 3, 4, 5 times a day because it was all that I had. And I said with pride, I would never let my kids even know what it tastes like because I knew I had to eat it when I was little. Ironically enough, later on in the film, it shows me splitting a can of spaghetti between my 2 children. And I didn't feel as proud anymore. I'm from Philadelphia, and it is far from here. But I'm here hopefully to raise awareness about what's going on in your own community. Hopefully to make people feel that, the ones that are experiencing it, to feel like it's okay to talk about it. I was always taught we couldn't talk about it. Doing this is very empowering, but at the same time, when this is all over, I go back home. And things have changed throughout the years, but they're still not perfect. And I hope that with my efforts of not only traveling the country and talking to everyone and trying to let them know that this exists here and that it can happen to anyone, but that also my efforts at the Hill and letting the people who are making the decisions on the budget cuts for the SNAP program, for the Farm Bill and things of that nature, to know that this is affecting our future. In the film, it shows that at the time, 6 cents is what is being spent on school lunches to feed our children. And what's so astonishing to me about that is, how are we going to raise our leaders, our next presidents, our soldiers, our doctors, if this is how much we think they're worth? A lot of the kids that go to school, these are the only meals that they're receiving throughout the day. This is their breakfast, this is their lunch, and sometimes it might have to be their dinner. And if we don't really stop and take a look at what our children are being fed, it's going to affect how much our future, it's going to affect how our future can progress. Because if these children are technically malnourished, how can we expect them to help run our country? And the billions and billions of dollars that are going to have to go towards medical bills because they're not receiving it when they need to. My son, his name is Aiden. He has a lot of health problems that technically are my fault. I couldn't feed him what he needed. And I have to live with that every day in my life. And in doing this and speaking out and making myself vulnerable, I know that it's not going to fix him. But hopefully it'll stop other families from having to go through what we go through. Hopefully it'll stop the mothers having to yell at their children just because they want a second plate. Hopefully it'll raise awareness to when your child's best friend has come over for dinner and is asking for seconds or asking to take some home. That it'll help you guys take a second look and maybe ask some questions and want to reach out to the families and want to help them. I've been advocating for 8 years, and that's nothing compared to how long I've been struggling with this issue, or how my parents struggled with this issue. And I refuse to let my children have to struggle with this issue with their children. I hope that today you guys can understand that, as I said, I'm not here for myself. And I'm not only here for my children. I'm here as a human being. As a person that can go through any type of struggle just like you can. As a person who can lose their job tomorrow and go through this issue. I'm here to let you know that it's okay to talk about it. And I know that it's hard. Believe me, I know that it's hard. But if we don't talk about it, we're never going to get the help that we need. One of the hardest parts is having to ask for help. And my friends have always said, you know, you think you're super mom, you think you can do everything on your own, and in reality it takes a village to raise a child. And I've learned throughout my struggles, it's very true. I hope that you guys leave today with some insight as far as what's really going on around you. I hope that you're inspired to try to help make a change, to stand up, to be a voice, to understand that this shouldn't be happening. Not only because food isn't right, but because it's not because we have a lack of food. We have plenty of food. But can we all afford it? Can we all have access to it? Are we educated on what's good for you and what's not good for you? I stated yesterday that, you know, even during my advocacy, I had never known what a vegetable was. My parents never gave me vegetables. I didn't give them to my kids. And it's little things like that that'll make you think, how much of a difference would it have made if I had that education growing up? If I knew the difference between what was good and what was bad, and how I could have instilled that into my children. and how maybe my son wouldn't be affected the way that he is today. It's hard to keep my composure. It's still hard to look people in the eye. It's still hard not to feel inferior. Because there's just things that you're supposed to have and that you're supposed to do. And I never thought that something so simple as feeding my children will bring such an issue to my life. As I stated before, I don't want anyone to go through what I went through, what I'm continuing to go through, and what I will be going through tomorrow. Because it's a vicious, vicious, vicious cycle. And it seems like no matter how much things seem to get better, I always end up in the same place. While being here, I learned of a lot of different programs that are in Sheboygan that you guys are very blessed to have. So I just want to stress the importance of you guys volunteering and taking advantage of these programs, and don't feel ashamed because you're there. Shame isn't going to feed your kid. But to try to leave this on a positive note so that I can stop crying. My children are amazing. I'm very blessed to be their mom. And despite all of our challenges, they're not mad at me. They're actually very, very, very proud. And if there's anything that I would want them to know, is that I'm trying. And that's all I can do. Just try. So I encourage you all, no matter how many times you fail, just try. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barbie. Thank you. Thank you, Barbie, thank you for being with us and making yourself vulnerable, not only to your story, but to the struggles of hunger. And we give thanks for your presence here today. And just to follow up that, a couple things, just a little bit of a lighter note. Barbie, congratulations, was able to get her associate's degree in criminology and started a job. She has a new job and stuff like that that started in January. So we give thanks for that. We encourage your conversations with hunger issues. And just real quick for a couple of seconds, in John's Gospel today, chapter 21 was a later addition. That's put in a little bit later than when the original gospel was written. And part of that is that what was the early church going to do now that Jesus was risen and that he was ascended into heaven, and what was going to be their identity and who were they going to be as God's people? And so this story of Jesus on the beach and the disciples going fishing was a reminder to what their call was as disciples and as God's people. And when Peter gets reinstated or reaffirmed in who he is in the church, what happens is that Jesus says, "Hey, Peter, do you love me?" "Yes, I do." "Well, feed my sheep." This is our assigned lesson for the day from our lectionary. How fitting is that? And then the second time, "Take care of my lambs." And then the third time, "Yes, I do love you, then feed my sheep." And we are called as God's people to continue to do the ministries that we're doing, that we've been blessed to be able to do, and this congregation needs to be congratulated and lifted up. And just the words of encouragement that God continues us to continue to find ways to help feed God's people, not only physically, spiritually, so that all can know the abundance of God's love and grace. Amen. Hey.